thoughts from somewhere else, flashes of insight. You've entered Mercury's terrain. How precise are you? How do thoughts come to you? How well do you communicate? Mercury is the ruler of both Gemini and Virgo, two distinct personalities and elements, Gemini air and Virgo earth. But Mercury is closest to the Sun, even closer than the Earth. Perhaps you've heard about the effects of the retrograde of this planet as your introduction to Mercury's domain. It's not the only planet that goes retrograde, but it has big implications for our communication with our higher selves, along with the people around us. Are you chronically misunderstood even when you think you're being precise? Sometimes you can communicate with someone with the utmost articulation, but you just can't reach them. Have you considered that this has to do more with their lack of connection with what you're saying? That your path is unfamiliar to them? It can be frustrating trying to communicate the core of who you are and being met with confusion or rejection, and taking it personally. Let's talk polarities of Mercury-ruled signs. Gemini has a polarity of Sagittarius, and Virgo has a polarity of Pisces. The more striking polarity to me is the one between Virgo and Pisces, and I'm talking about extreme boundaries versus no boundaries at all. This was a year of learning boundaries for me. I didn't learn many boundaries in my family of origin, but they have a lot to do with how you respect yourself and others, both your family of origin and your boundaries. I was not creating enough boundaries for myself, and being a 12th houser, right, with my sun in the 12th house and Mercury in the 12th house, my boundaries can be a little permeable at times, and this leaves me open to people who may not respect me and are just looking to take what they can get. When you're leaving the door always open, people just walk in and out as they please. This year I've learned to close the door when I need, and to communicate to people that they need to knock before they enter freely. This can make some people angry because they might be on the opposite end and have always been shown that you can use others to get your needs met without asking, just assuming, just taking. With Mercury and Virgo energy, we see there's a way to communicate where our boundaries are, and that will likely make people angry. Not everyone. Maybe you'll be able to reestablish the relationship after the boundaries are set. But it's almost a guarantee that when you set your boundaries, there are people who will still test them. And I've learned the hard way that leaving your boundaries open is never the way to get people to love you. The only way you'll allow the conditions for love is with clear-cut boundaries. So here's a personal example. I was working with someone who I conditioned to always depend on me in an unhealthy way. Even when I didn't have any more to give, I would give to this person. My time and other stuff. Eventually, this person felt so comfortable with me that they took from me without asking, and they ended up taking credit for my work. Now, on my end, I have to take some responsibility for this, and I'll explain why. Had I laid out a firm boundary line, this person may have felt compelled to have a conversation with me to see if it was okay to take. But since we didn't have that set in our relationship, they were conditioned to take without asking me and got angry with me when I did not want to continue the relationship. So why should I be ending the relationship, they probably thought. They were probably thinking I could always take freely from them before. So now there was a broken relationship that could have been avoided but now seemed beyond repair. When you're used to someone not having boundaries, you form the friendship based on that, and that can allow for others to have predatory behavior. But you're not the victim in this situation because you can lay out firm boundaries. What did we have now, me and this person I was talking about? I found that we didn't have much left because the relationship really was based on them taking from me and them not giving back to me in return. This is Thorn 1 with minus Mercury. Gemini and Sagittarius. Two polarities. Gemini being ruled by Mercury, Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter. We can see what they have in common. Like any other polarity, they're related for a reason. So what is it? Let's face it. They say things we don't want to hear. They put their feet in their mouth a lot of the time, but they also have an interest in communicating truths as they come to them, right at that moment. Sometimes truths can be ugly. That's pretty time-tested. Now, Virgo, on the other hand, is the sign with the reputation as the perfectionist. So Virgo might think things through many times before they say what they're thinking out loud. Gemini is the gossip, the one that is actually too double-minded. But really, I think they just channel messages better than any other sign, and they're constantly receiving, constantly thinking. Now, let's get this straight. Both Virgo and Gemini can be petty. Virgo with details and Gemini with gossip, since they rule basic communication or the third house. Virgo has to do with the details, having the most information and being painstaking. Since they're also an earth sign, this has to do with the health. So Mercury has to do with the intellect, but since it's functioning in Virgo, in this case, it's grounded and it has us think very carefully about how we exist in this world. So this is the domain of the 6th house, and that's ruled by Virgo. So two of the great artists of all time, Beyonce and Kanye West, would represent Mercury-ruled people. So Beyonce is a Virgo, and Kanye West is a Gemini. I always remember people underestimating Beyonce. But look at her work. Her dancing, her poise, her perfection. Beyonce doesn't even give interviews anymore because she was tired of people asking her stupid questions. But Virgos will always prove you wrong. Kanye West receives messages from the universe, but people think that he's mentally ill. There's that popular line now in all these different songs, "I love you like Kanye loves Kanye," because he respects that he's a vessel for the divine. Now, obviously, he's still human, so he does not get everything 100% right, but still, he represents that channeled energy. Look at his clothing line, for instance. It's so chic and it appears futuristic, lacking gimmicks. And it's not hard to think of the beginning of his song of, and the Gemini wit in the song 30 Hours. Do you know this song? In the song, he says, "My ex says she gave me the best years of her life. I saw a recent picture of her. I guess she was right." And you can't get any more perfect than that in terms of just funniness, wit, and pettiness. So, friends, the truth can be petty. It just can. And sometimes we will not be able to put a filter on facts. Now, regarding the lyrics of 30 Hours as misogynistic, okay, but that's not what we're talking about here. Not excusing misogyny, but sometimes we have to deal with the facts as they come to us, and we see them in all of their harshness. Some people have trouble facing the truth, which can be debilitating. You find out you have a life-threatening brain tumor, for instance, and you only have a few options. Instead of dealing with the options, you decide you'll pretend that you don't have a brain tumor. And then not deciding becomes willful ignorance. See, you can't unknow what you already know. Since Virgo rules health, it's worth thinking about. Do you always take control of your health, or just hope that if you ignore it, you'll still be okay? Virgo's precision shows us that we can have control over our lives. Its dark side is when we think that we can control the lives of others. Don't eat that. Don't do that. Why don't you work out? Why don't you respect yourself? Here, let me help you organize this. We first have to ask people for permission. And since Virgo strikes me as a sign with boundaries, intuitively, Virgos can understand this, but sometimes the struggle for control and the need for control is just too strong. The earthiness of Virgo reminds us, how can we communicate with the divine when we can't even communicate with our own body and take control of our own lives? This is Analog Brain with About a Stroke.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, when the world sleeps, when the world sleeps, when the world sleeps, a moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment we take the pledge of dedication and to the still larger cause of humanity.
In medical astrology, the bodily systems ruled by Mercury run the gambit, but I'll just say that you can vaguely understand all the bodily systems as connected by the way that they're tied to your mind. So you might have some unconscious beliefs, at least this is what Louise Hay believed and what she wrote about in You Can Heal Your Life, is that you have unconscious beliefs that control your bodily system. So if you have wrong thinking in your unconscious, it can control you. So for instance, if you have shame in your body, then you can have a variety of different ailments based on that shame. But I'm going to go over some of the bodily systems said to be ruled by Mercury, which would be the brain, the central nervous system, the thyroid gland, the five senses, hands, and then to go into Virgo ruled systems, the digestive system, intestines, spleen, whole nervous system, and that goes for Gemini as well. And then Gemini is said to rule the arms, lungs, shoulders, and the brain as well. So you see how they overlap and how they're kind of all-encompassing, because if you talk about the brain, you're talking about how the brain is tied to the body in so many ways. So think about how these systems could be impacted by Mercury retrograde, sure, but also more likely if you let them go, they can be impacted if you ignore your body and what it needs, and if you're just all in your head. Let's skip to associated tarot cards. I want to talk first about the Magician, and the Magician in the traditional Rider-Waite tarot deck is pictured as he's casting a spell. He's holding, his spell-casting wand, if you want to call it that, over his head, and then we see the infinity symbols represented above him, which would stand for infinite possibilities. And the table where he's enacting his magic would stand for his current perceptions and what he would like to see changed. And so it shows us the magic that we have inside of our own thinking. And so you could take that in a few ways. You could say that people could enact magical thinking where they kind of don't know where reality is and where it starts and where it stops. But ever notice when somebody has a wrong perception of you or cannot approach your whole being because of their level of understanding? You can also see how if they just understood a few things or could see life through your eyes or have experienced life the way that you have, that they could be on the same level, or at least you could understand each other better. And this is the issue of perception. For instance, I was watching a CNN documentary the other day on the history of comedy, and Keegan-Michael Key was speaking on what an impact comedy has had and can have on social change, because comedy is a way to disarm people and show them a different perspective while they're hardly even realizing it. Now, I would consider that a type of magic. Cups represent the emotions, and wands indicate creativity, so we have cups in there and wands, and also pentacles, which would be worldly possessions, and swords. So all of these things are represented in the magician card, and it shows that your mind has all of those things at its disposal, but you have to access it. It's your magic that says, okay, I want these things to be under my influence. And so it's saying that you have control over the events of your life. Now, I have mixed feelings on this because of my background and my training, right? My intellect tells me that no, that's not true, because you have to take somewhat of a sociological approach and recognize that, hey, sometimes things are going to be controlled by outside circumstances, like, say, poverty. You grow up in poverty, you don't have access to certain types of education, and it gives you a deficit along the line. Like, you don't have access to a certain type of education, so you don't get into a certain college, or you don't get into a certain job you want, or whatever. So that's just one thread of thought. Or you don't have access to the right kinds of food, so you end up developing physical disability. For, let's take a worst case scenario, and that's because of poverty. But at a certain point, you have to decide, is this going to be my entire reality forever? Am I going to say that I will never get better or learn anything new, or that different types of knowledges aren't valuable, or that different types of abilities aren't valuable? Otherwise, what do we have? We have, right, the bad manifestation or extreme manifestation of Virgo, where everything has to be perfect or it's not worth doing at all. That's no way to live life. This is Ketsa with Trix. So let's return back to our previous scenario in regards to having control over your life and receiving divine guidance for your life, imagining things outside of your comfort zone. So let's say you didn't grow up in poverty. Let's say you grew up, you had a good amount of privilege, but your problem maybe is that you never learned how to work for anything because everything was always given to you. So maybe one of your challenges in life is to find things that you work hard for and that aren't given to you. And maybe that's your challenge. Everyone has different challenges, but I think one of the biggest lessons we all have to learn is how to assert our own agency. And what does our agency look like? What style do we have? We're all special beings with different life circumstances. So what does it look like when we enact our abilities? And so now I want to move to a tarot card that represents Gemini, and that would be the Lovers. So this tarot card, you see two individuals on the front, and let's just go over the themes, acknowledging the kinship of all people, maybe not in this incarnation, maybe not, for 30 minutes at a time and then maybe like them again, but acknowledging the fact that we're human and sympathizing with other people, getting close to people by speaking with them and communicating your truth, making those connections with people and being intimate with them, not just surface level stuff, but actually opening up to them and letting them be genuine with you. And sometimes Geminis can have a difficult time with this, depending on what their energy is overall in their whole chart. So Mercury, and especially the air incarnation of Mercury, Gemini has to do with recognizing that you can hold different viewpoints in your head at the same time. You can have, say, one political view, say like to everyone else, you're this conservative political person and you only follow these set doctrines, right? But actually you don't, and there are a handful of things that you don't agree with within this conservative ideology. So technically you're holding several different viewpoints in your head at once, because you're saying, okay, well, I agree with this, but then this is not right, but I can still identify as this. So, it's a constant juggling act. And let's talk about this. Have you ever had a falling out with someone and then realized that what they're actually thinking on their side is something that you can relate to, but it's still wrong? Even if you know their perception is flawed and they're not seeing the whole picture, you can understand what they're thinking. And to use this energy, that means that we can put ourselves in someone else's place and see what they think about us while also remaining neutral. This can be scary, but how else would we understand communications with others and repair ruptures? And this has to do with recovery, repair, actually changing things and not just saying, well, I agree to disagree, but figuring out, okay, where do we go from here? I guess you could agree to disagree and still get on with life, but what I mean is actually coming to an agreement. So this tarot card, the Lovers, can also involve establishing personal beliefs and questioning your opinions. And that's where having multiple points of view, or being able to hold on to those multiple points of view, is crucial. And also you need to stay true to yourself. So if you, to use my example in the past, if you have a political ideology and it doesn't conform to your core beliefs, then you can't say like, well, okay, I don't really accept all the tenets of this belief system, but I'm going to accept it anyway, because no, you have to say, no, I'm an independent and I actually have nuanced views on this. And you have to set your own philosophy and go by your own standards. You have to determine your values. And sometimes that means, okay, I can absorb some of my values into the group because this isn't going to be detrimental. And that's another way, you have to use discernment, and that's Mercury energy. That's Virgo mainly, because Virgos are very discerning, right? We talked about boundaries. And that's struggling with the temptation to be too judgmental. And you need to be able to figure out what's right for you. This is Kathleen Martin with Bipolar Vortex Boogie.
You claim that you hate it, so why do you create it? Drama. Lying and deceiving, cheating and thieving. Drama. It's a bipolar vortex boogie. Yes, 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 yes. It's a bipolar vortex boogie. Boogie, boogie. You're falsely positive and you're positively false. It's a bipolar vortex boogie. I love it, I love it, I love it. Yeah, it's a bipolar vortex boogie. Hate it. You're falsely positive and you're positively false. Whoa, whoa, buster, drama. If you try to attract it, you don't want to subtract it. Drama. Lying and deceiving, cheating and thieving. Drama. 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 Drama.
One of the problems with too much intellect is you forget about your heart. For the last 10 years, I've been in one form of formal schooling or another, and prior to that, obviously K through 12. And the people that I communicate, and I've come to terms with this, are not heart-centered, mostly. And this can be great when you're trying to solve a scientific problem, but science is rarely the end of any equation, but merely one way of looking at it. We can also get knowledge from our gut feelings, esoteric teachings, interviewing others about their experiences, subjective findings. We would say, there are qualitative and quantitative methods for things. The stone jade is associated with both Virgo and Gemini, and it heals the heart chakra. And I think with the Mercury energy, if you're overdoing it with the Mercury energy and you're not balanced, I think that you would need that heart center healing. And if we're not careful, we can lean on our intellect so extremely that we forget to use our hearts to relate to others. We forget how to feel our way into things. Jade is an amulet of good luck and friendship, and it signifies the wisdom gathered in tranquility, meditating, dispelling any negative energy, encouraging you to see yourself as you really are. so you can see others how they really are. And jade is also a dream stone, so you can not only release negative thoughts, but you can soothe your mind and stabilize your personality, integrating your mind and your body together and stimulating ideas to make tasks less complex and easier to act upon. It's said that if you place jade on your forehead, it brings insightful dreams and improves your remembering of dreams, releasing suppressed emotions through the dream process. Now, your intellect can trick you into thinking that you know everything. This is pretty common. After you've read so many books, maybe you start thinking that you're the smartest person who ever lived. And what's that quote about, you get smart enough, you realize you know nothing? Intellect works something like that. And we know that it's going to take a well-rounded approach to life to bring about good health and healing. This is Orbique with Simple.
Co jest? Odłączyć można już.
What's your intellect for? Is it to show off? Or does it have a higher purpose? Can you help people with your intellect? Can you help yourself? Have you used perfectionism or intellectualism to deal with hardships in life? If so, you may have been initially comforted, but have you listened to your body, your heart? What do you do every day to connect with all parts of yourself and with the divine? When you study, are you open to admitting that there are phenomena that require faith and have no intellectual equivalence?
My God, it's full of stars.